First of all, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to present at this year's Forbes Day Symposium. I appreciate your flexibility in allowing me to take my presentation ahead of time because I will be at a workshop in Boulder, Colorado next week. The title of my presentation is Exploring the Psychometrics of the Retrospective Behavioral Inhibition Questionnaire. To begin with, behavioral inhibition, or BI, is a temperamental trait where children express shyness, restraint, or other negative emotions in response to novel people or environment. The emphasis here is on novel stimuli, although children extreme in the BI trait will continue to express inhibition toward the same stimuli over time, even though it is not new or novel anymore. BI is associated with anxiety disorders and is considered one of many precursors to anxiety. Specifically, BI has been most associated with social-based anxiety, although some papers have linked it with generalized anxiety. However, the genetic and environmental etiology of this relationship is yet to be explored. While the heritability of BI has been found to be 50 to 64% in toddlers, that really only implies that there is a genetic component to BI that may or may not be similar to the genetic components of anxiety. So what I am interested in is the link between BI and anxiety from a psychiatric genetics perspective. Hence, I have designed a three-phase project that strategically explores this relationship. The first phase, which this presentation will cover, involves exploring the psychometrics of a novel assessment of BI so that we can have a reliable measure of the trait going forward. The second phase involves using this measure of BI to explore threat-related physiology of BI in juveniles. Finally, the third phase explores the genetic epidemiology of BI and its source of covariance with anxiety. Now I'm going to delve into the first phase of my project, which is exploring a novel measure of BI. BI is a construct that has been around since the 1980s, and from a developmental and clinical perspective, it has been very well studied. That also means that there are many assessments out there that measure BI. Let's walk through a typical scenario of a child who is suspected of having BI. Chances are the child is young, maybe around age 3, and has not had additional environmental stressors such as school or peers. They come in and the clinician performs a long behavioral observation while the parent fills out many questionnaires about their child. While simple, this traditional measure has many drawbacks. First, longitudinal observations of BI through more life stages, say from ages 3 through 16, are not practical with this measure. Second, not all researchers who are interested in BI work with such young populations. Third, the behavioral observation is a long assessment that requires a lot of specialized training. So in my opinion, the best solution to this problem has been the Behavioral Inhibition Questionnaire, or BIQ. The BIQ has 6 factors of BI with interpretable structure. They are unfamiliar adults, approaching peers, performance, unfamiliar situations, separation/school, and physical activities. The BIQ has good validity because it was compared to the aforementioned behavioral observation as well as good internal consistency. 3 major studies have replicated the psychometrics of the BIQ. Now, I really like the BIQ because it captures the nuances of BI with its 6 factors. However, it is still a little limiting. First, the need to assess children at a young age due to the novelty and developmental aspects of BI is not always feasible, so the BIQ can still only be administered to young children. However, parents may not pay much attention to BI-like behaviors until other symptoms of anxiety appear later in childhood or adolescence, and so they may miss that window to detect BI. However, there is a need for, hence, there is a need for the novel measure that I'm about to discuss. So this brings me to the Retrospective Behavioral Inhibition Questionnaire, or RBIQ. The RBIQ is identical to the BIQ except that it assesses BI in a retrospective manner. It has the same 30-question Likert-style structure, but the instructions and questions have been changed such that parents report on past behavior of their children, not current. Specifically, parents of children ages 9 to 13 are instructed to report on behaviors related to BI when their child was between the ages of 2 and 6. So it captures both that pre-K age and school transition. To date, the psychometrics of this measure have not been assessed. We feel that to move forward with exploring BI, we must first validate our measure of it. Hence, my research aims are as follows. First, to test the hypothesis that the RBIQ is reliable. Second, to test the hypothesis that the RBIQ is a valid instrument for assessing BI. And third, to estimate the factor structure of the RBIQ. Now for the methods. Participants in the current project were part of a larger study of anxiety in juveniles, where parents and twins came in. They were administered experimental tasks, child self-reports, parent self-reports, and parent reports of their children, the latter of which the RBIQ is part of. Of these additional measures, I chose to utilize the ones that tapped into anxiety and symptoms of BI, the Scared P and the CBCL. The Scared P is a reliable and valid measure of anxiety with 5 subscales: generalized anxiety, panic, separation anxiety, school phobia, and social phobia. The CBCL has 8 subscales, but we only focus on the 4 that most closely aligned with symptoms of anxiety and BI. These were anxious/depressed, withdrawn/depressed, somatic complaints, and social problems. As you can see, to get a full picture of the RBIQ, we perform typical analyses for reliability, validity, and factor structure. For reliability, we assess internal consistency and test-retest reliability. For validity, we examined the correlations between the RBIQ, Scared P, and CBCL. Finally, we performed various exploratory and confirmatory factor analyses. For my results, I only included data with no missing data points. Hence, I had 447 RBIQ, 482 Scared P, and 516 CBCL reports in my final analysis. As you can see, the demographics do not vary between these 3 measures. For AIM-1, Provax alpha for the RBIQ was 0.962, which is excellent. Test-retest reliability was also very high at 0.947. For AIM-2, the RBIQ showed acceptable validity with moderate correlations between the Scared P social anxiety subscale, Scared P total sum, and CBCL withdrawn/depressed subscale. For AIM-3, several different types of factor analyses and structures were explored. The best fitting model was a 5-factor bifactor model, which I will show you. So this is a condensed version of my final factor model. To orient you, a bifactor model keeps all of the items loaded together in the middle with a bifactor at the bottom and then individual subscales at the top. All items will load onto the bifactor, as you can see by these bottom arrows, but they may not load onto individual subscales, as I've illustrated with items 1 and 2. You can see that items 1 and 2 clearly also load onto the bifactor, but they don't load onto any other subscales at the top. However, items 3, 30, and various ones in between do load onto various subscales. So in terms of my data, this means that the bifactor is tapping into an overall construct of BI. In this model, 2 of the original factors from the BIQ, unfamiliar situations and peers, have dropped off. The items that were originally part of these factors are still in the model, but they are broad enough to now be part of this bifactor here. The current model does keep 4 specific factors from the BIQ model, and these are now the subscales at the top: physical activities, school/separation, performance, and unfamiliar adults. The item loadings onto these factors are mostly identical to that of the BIQ, with a few exceptions and some cross-loadings, which I will get to later. To conclude, the RBIQ shows excellent reliability via Cronbach's alpha and interclass correlation. It also shows acceptable validity, correlating most strongly with 3 subscales from the SCARED-P and CBCL that had the most questions related to shyness. Hence, we can conclude that the RBIQ is a psychometrically sound, valid instrument for assessing BI in this age range by parent report. In terms of the factor structure, I am happy with it, but must point out its differences from the BIQ. Recall that the BIQ had 6 correlated factors. In this study, we opted for stricter fit model criteria and to explore other model options and found that a 5-factor bifactor model was the best fit. While there is a lot of cross-loading in the current bifactor model, it is likely due to the fact that this new model makes some of the items unnecessary. These redundant items may be causing extra noise and hence all of the cross-loading. We do plan to explore this further before publishing these results. Nevertheless, even with the cross-loading, the model is interpretable and makes theoretical sense. Hence, we can conclude that there is an overall BI factor with 4 robust but somewhat overlapping subscales. Excuse me. So the biggest implication for this study is that it is the very first one to explore the psychometrics of the RBIQ. Next steps will include consulting with the author of the RBIQ and deriving a factor score from the model. After this is done, then I will be able to move on to phases 2 and 3 of my project, which will explore threat-related physiology of BI in juveniles and the genetic epidemiology between BI and anxiety. With that said, my long-term goal is to be able to add to the BI literature from a psychiatric genetics perspective. So that is all that I have today. I must acknowledge the assistance and/or use of my data from Drs. Hedema, Robertson-Ney, Lee, Gillespie, and Moss from my department. I thank you all very much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Have a great day and good luck to everyone else presenting.